All right, here we are back with another episode of the Mosh and Sez Show, and today's going to be exciting because
I am so pumped up because Chaz, this is our very first episode with a guest. And holy cow, what a guest. You pulled some strings, you reached into your roller decks in your little black book, and we have got a blast from the past. You've heard of JBL, you've heard of MVP. Today we got PJG because we'll be talking to Pete Gas. Look at this.
And there he is.
What's going on, guys? How are you?
Hey, Pete, just so you know, Simon's wearing his Mean Street Posse sweater today for you.
I noticed it. That's Pete's.
When he got on, I go, what are you wearing? He goes, it's my Mean Street Posse shirt. And I'm like, oh, right, fair enough.
Pete, I don't know how many episodes of our show you've watched, but I am unabashed and unashamed at my marking out right now because I have been such a huge fan of yours. I don't know how much, if anything, Chaz told you about me. I've been in the business for 19 years. I was trained by Bubba and Devon, but I'm also from Connecticut. You're from the mean streets of Greenwich. I'm from the mean streets of Bridgeport, Connecticut. So
your streets are meaner than mine, I'll tell you that.
And Pete, it's okay to tell him you don't give a shit and to shut up if you want. It's okay because Simon will. I love Simon to death, but he's a huge mark and he will mark out. So that's what makes this fun doing it with him.
He's all good with me.
We just want to talk to you about a couple things. So, Simon, you want to start?
But Chazzer, hold on. Before we begin, we got to let the people know, not only a founding member of the Mean Street Posse, not only a good fan of yours, but we're talking to a two-time Memphis Championship Wrestling Southern Tag Team Champion, the last ever PPP Heavyweight Champion, and a two-time Hardcore Champion. You're in the record books, baby.
Yeah, and nobody ever pinned me in Memphis, so just for the record, for Power Pro. I got the title stripped from me. I told King that, and King was like, so.
Yeah, that's Memphis wrestling. You're from the Northeast, Memphis wrestling, and you don't get along because that's just what Memphis wrestling was all about. It was all about Memphis, and no one from the Northeast was allowed to ever get over. Never.
And see, I'm psyched because obviously today's show is going to be a little bit longer than normal. Pete Gas is our first guest. I'm super marking out for it. And we both have tons of questions for you, Pete. So, Chaz, let's get right into it because I want to talk about just a little heads up for the folks. We're going to talk about your earlier rejection. You expressed interest to your pal Shane McMahon in 1992 about wanting to get into the business, and he discouraged you. I want to talk about your favorites and least favorites to have been in the ring with. And, of course, a veritable where are they now, right from the horse's mouth, catch up with Pete and what's life after wrestling.
Yeah, so Pete, I don't know the story about you trying to get in 92. Tell me about that.
So I was at a point in my life where I really didn't know what direction I was going to go in, and I'd always wanted to be in the business. And I remember going to Shane's office. I remember it like it was yesterday. I went in and I talked to him and I said, "Hey, I wanted to talk to you about something. I know this is kind of a hard ask for me to do, and but I want to get in the business." I said, I look at things and I watch a wrestling match and I kind of have a vision of seeing things, how the boys work. Obviously, I didn't know too much, but I thought I knew more. You always think you know more than you really know until you start doing it. And I just said, I'd love the opportunity. And Shayna was like, "Gosh, you don't want to do that. They're going to send you to Memphis," which I ended up doing anyway. He goes, "They're going to send you to Memphis. You're going to have to put the ring up." Had to do that. All those things that, you have to do when you're in Memphis. You travel, you work for $25 a day and all that good stuff. And, you pay your dues. And he's like, you're going to be treated like shit. And I said, I played football at UConn and I ran scout team for a year and I was basically a blocking dummy. So I kind of know what it feels like to pay your dues. There you go. Go Huskies. And, you pay your dues that way too. So, but he kind of discouraged me on it and didn't want me to get involved. And I think it was more about him I guess everything we had to go through, Chaz, right? I mean, the whole thing with the recognition of being Shane's friends and having to go through all that heat. I
Right.
think he was trying to avoid that back then as well. And that's 6 years later, I end up getting a call from him. Hey, do you guys want to do me a favor? And then that's when we started doing vignettes.
You should have looked at him and you should have said, listen, I asked you for a favor 6 years ago. Where was that then, buddy? Should have threw that back at him.
Now, the crazy thing that I find
everything. What's that, bud? I'm sorry.
No, the crazy thing is that you ended up being sent to Memphis after you had already made your main roster debut.
Yes. Yeah, we did
that
everything
is so
backwards.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but at first, though, you guys were coming in. It was only supposed to be a couple of spots. It wasn't more of a permanent thing. So there was no reason to send you to Memphis at first, especially when they said, go out there, get your ass kicked, and don't get hurt. You don't know anything. We know you don't know nothing. Just don't go get hurt. Just don't get hurt.
Right, and Vince said, don't get hurt, don't hurt my guys, and put on a show.
Right.
And, Rodney and I basically just threw ourselves around not knowing much, to be honest with you. So,
yeah,
you helped me out a lot.
When the Mean Street Posse,
I'm sure we're going to get into that, by the way, because I'm going to talk about that.
I may have some Puerto Rico stories for us to talk about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've known Chaz for almost 15 years. I didn't know you guys were so close. And in my extensive research, which includes a little reading material called Looking at the Lights, My Path from Fan to Wrestling, Neil, thank you very much. Available anywhere you find your favorite literature. When the Mean Street Posse was first conceptualized, it was you and Rodney, Willie Green, Billy P, Sir Horowitz, but you and Rodney were the only guys that actually grew up with Shane, right? I know Rodney and Shane were friends first, and then they met you guys.
No, well, actually, Rodney and Shane knew each other the longest, and then Billy, they kind of knew Billy through sports. We all knew each other through sports throughout the town. We played against each other in football, played on the same team in some cases, and Billy got to know those guys a little bit better. And Willie Green was a part of that as well. Willie knew Shane from junior high. And then Sahowitz, the last guy that he hardly ever comes up in conversation, he actually was Shane's college roommate or prep school roommate. So that kind of, but he became so, once Shane college, Sahowitz hung out with us a lot, and he ended up becoming like one of the family, basically, or our group. So.
And do you know, Pete, what happened? Why those other guys fizzled out or faded away, and it was just you and Rodney, and then Joey Abs came along later. He was actually an actual worker that they put with you guys as kind of the ringer or the heavy.
Right. So after that WrestleMania in Philadelphia, about 10 days, not even 10 days afterwards, Shane called Rodney and I into his office and said, first he gave us envelopes. Now he had told us, he said, hey, will you guys do me a favor? So Chaz, we didn't even think we were getting paid. We just thought we were doing him a favor. Right.
Right.
So he goes and he slides these 2 envelopes in front of Rodney and I, and he says, this is for you guys. We're like, what's this? He goes, assholes, it's your pay. We're like, we got paid for that? So then, but to answer your question, with regards to so Billy Pirro had a pretty good job working for a billionaire as a caretaker, and he had a good gig going. So he wasn't going to leave what he was doing for an impromptu. We didn't know how long this whole thing was going to last after they brought us back. Rodney and I were willing to do anything and everything. I could always find another job someplace else at that point in time. Rodney was a mechanic, and he felt the same way. Willie Green really wasn't asked. Willie didn't have the head for it, to be honest with you. Not to trample on the man's grave. He had passed away last year, but he just wasn't. He didn't have the head for it. He would have got killed. The guys would have not liked him that much. And then Sahowitz was a chef, or is a chef, and he he had his own thing going on, so he wasn't in the factor of any of that as well. So And then once we started training, actually, once Rodney and I were on the road and we started doing, we were doing just like a lot of spots. We were a novelty to the boys in the back. I think Chaz can answer to that better. And then once we lost a loser leave town match, and the ratings against Briscoe and Patterson were the highest 15-minute segment in cable history, that's when Vince decided to bring us back. So then we started really training very hard and left our jobs. And then they needed a guy that can come in and work, and that became Joey Abs.
I do want to mention to all our listeners, what Pete is referring to, May 10th, 1999 episode of Raw. Pete and Rodney faced off against the Stooges. And at that time, like Pete made reference to, that was the highest rated segment up to that point. Pete, how does it feel to be able to say something like that? I've talked to Chaz, like both of you guys are immortalized. And not just in general, but in something you guys both love so passionately. How does it feel to be able to say, yeah, I was part of a segment that was the highest rated up to that point, and you're in the record books. We ran through some of your accolades. How does it feel to know that something you've accomplished is going to outlive you? Like long after you're gone, your name is going to live on in one way or another.
To be honest with you, when you say it, I don't think of it like that. When you say it, it kind of hits home because it's kind of cool when you think about it. Be honest with you, I was just so happy to be there and be a part of it, and not to take not to sidestep your question at all, but we were just so willing to do anything and everything to stay every day that we were just, like I said, we're just glad to be there. But now looking back at it, when you could actually appreciate everything that happened, it's kind of impressive. Especially, like I remember that when the ratings came out later that night, Rodney and I were driving home from that city, and Shane had called, and he said, "Hey," he had called Rodney's phone. I was driving, Rodney was in shotgun. He said, "I want to put somebody on the phone," and then it was Vince, and he said, "Boys." I could still hear the whole conversation. He said, "I just want to let you know the ratings came out from last night, and you guys had the highest rated segment for wrestling in cable history." And then he started talking about the greats of all time. You know, he talked about, Ric Flair's, the Chaz Warringtons, the Hulk Hogan's, all the big names of the past and present, and how we had gotten the opportunity to, how our ratings were really high, at the highest. And, that's when Vince was like, he's not a dummy, he saw money there. And, when I talked to JR about it years later, when I wrote my book, JR just said, yeah, he says, we saw money in you guys, and we saw money. Then, because I talked to him, which I know we're going to get to, because Chaz already teased it, that about Puerto Rico. That was the same thing. Chaz, Chaz had said it, and we'll get into that. But he, JR said, we branched you off the Mean Street Posse because we saw money in you. So that's, at the end of the day, it's business, right? So I think it's pretty cool to answer your question. I know I'm a little long-winded sometimes, but it was
your answer is great, because Simon asked me that a couple weeks ago, and my answer was pretty much the same. Like, it's hard to put into words. Like, he talks to me about, like, because all the figures, we got the new ones out and the T-shirts and the figure, and I'm just like, it's the same thing for me, because it's just like, I was the same way. I was just happy to be there, wanted to contribute. It's just so surreal, but the best way to put it is, it's like you said, it's kind of cool. It's just kind of a cool thing to do, and it's really difficult when you have to put it in words when you think about it that way. Because again, Pete's very down to earth, just like I am. We put our pants on the same way every day as everyone else. We're just fortunate enough to have had to do a job that we love doing, that was in front of people. So it's a very humbling thing, is what it is.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, as well as I do. I mean, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
I still like, I have goosebumps now just thinking about it. Like,
me too.
Like, people, when people, like, you know, when they recognize you, it's been 24 years or 23 years, whatever, since I've last been on television or whatever. Just the fact that people remember you, it means like you made a statement and you touched somebody's life. And I think that's pretty damn cool. You know, I mean, it says a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I
no,
mean, you guys are talking to one of those people, not for nothing. You know, I grew up a fan in the Attitude Era. I told Chaz, the first match I got to have against Chaz, my brother, I think in 19 years, my brother's come to less than a handful of my matches, but he was there for the first tag match my partner and I had against Chaz. And I look out into the crowd and my brother's bawling. So I thought something happened. Somebody died. Oh my goodness. After the show, he just recalled the Headbangers were our favorite tag team. We've dressed up as them. I have every figure on my wall of theirs here in my office. And I was in the ring against this guy. And it was just such a surreal moment. And you guys, I mean, if for nothing else, you guys are in the record books at WrestleMania. Your kids, your grandkids, their kids can always point back and go, that was a member of our family and look what they accomplished. So I just think it's, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say your brother was crying or you had tears in his eyes because he saw you getting stretched by Chaz and thought maybe, you know,
yeah,
you
Chaz did beat the hell out of me.
He was crying because he felt the chops we were laying in on you.
Yeah,
So,
Chaz, unfortunately for me, Chaz and Glenn really liked me, and that meant they liked to mess with me even more. So, yeah, my first one-on-one match with Glenn broke 3 of my ribs.
We can equate the matches to this, Pete. When Glenn and I would work Billy and Road Dogg, when they worked me, I never felt anything. They beat the shit out of Glenn. Well, with Simon and his partner, we beat the shit out of his partner. And Simon would be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't feel a thing. You beat the shit out of Frankie.
Well,
so
as,
yeah,
as long as you brought it up, can I bring something up?
Please.
Okay. So when I first started, Chaz actually took me under his wing. And I want to thank him for that. I know I've thanked him publicly. I've thanked him personally, but I've also wanted to thank him here on the show. Chaz looked out for me when he was like my big little brother, right? Because he's a year younger than me. So, but anyway, I just wanted to thank him personally on the show because when we were still green, he would do things like we had a indie match against the Dudley Boys, and he went to bat, and he went up to Bubba and Devon and said, "Hey, listen, these guys are green. They're trying to learn. Don't hurt them too bad. Help them learn and stuff." He did the little things to help us learn and get better, and I appreciate every bit of that, and thank you, bud. It was
that's awesome.
It was never forgotten. 25 years later, never forgotten. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You guys were great. You guys were fun to work with. And you wanted to. So my whole thing is, and it's always been this way, and I'm still this way now, is if I can tell you want to learn and you want to get better, I'll help you all day long. But if you're one of those people that go, yeah, I know. Yeah, okay. And I'm just like, all right, well, fuck off then. Then I'm not going to help you. But you guys clearly wanted to learn. And and Rodney was always trying to be the perfectionist of everything. Yes. And I can't tell you how many times live on TV we're like, Rodney, slow down, Rodney, slow down, slow down. Yeah. So a little tidbit of info, Simon. I don't know if you know this or not. So the very first Lowdown match was against Pete and Rodney, and they were actually there or in that area when I told you the story of how we walked in and there was a new tag team that said Lowdown, and I said, fuck, another tag team. Like, who the hell's Lowdown? And Shane walked by and he goes, oh, Chaz, that's you and D-Lo. Oh, Glenn, you're going back to Memphis. And we were like, and that's the match when I was standing up on Gorilla and Bruce Pritchard looked at me and said, take all of your earrings out. We want no headbanger. We want no mosh. Go out there and beat Chaz. And D-Lo's music hit. And I looked at D-Lo and I went, who's Chaz? I had no idea what we were doing. Like, I had no idea what to do as Chaz. That first match was against Pete and Rodney. Yeah.
Yep. And you superplexed me off the top rope, and I had never taken one before. And I think I shit my pants. I was so scared.
We're like, the finish is going to be, I did the superplex, and then it was kind of we're fighting off the powerbomb leg drop, the superplex, and then D-Lo did the frog splash. Pete's like, yeah, I can take that. And we got in the back. He goes, that's the first one I ever took. I was like, Yeah.
I was shitting up there. I was like, oh fuck, what if I slip? I'm gonna be a vegetable.
Jesus.
No. Yeah. So let's. Everyone's heard. I try to when we're doing these. I'm trying not to ask the same questions everyone else asks because that's the one thing I hate about doing people's podcasts is like ask you the same stupid questions over and over again. So let's jump right to Puerto Rico. Let's dive right into it.
No one talks about that. Okay.
Well, no one knows about it.
Okay, it's true.
So what had happened was you were in Memphis first, weren't you?
Yeah. Yes, I was.
Yeah. So that's when Tiger Ali Singh got hurt, and D'Lo and I again are the only team ever taken off the road and off TV because your manager was hurt. Left us home for 6 months and called us up and said, "Hey, we're sending you to Puerto Rico to get back into ring shape to bring you back on TV." And my big ploy was, please send me to OVW. I don't want to go to Puerto Rico. I hate Puerto Rico. I hated Puerto Rico. I was there twice before, hated it. And they were like, no, you're going there. You and D'Lo are going, and then Pete's going to be there. So we're like, all right, cool. Well, at least the three of us, at least we'll have a good time.
Chazzer, real quick, what about Puerto Rico did you hate?
The people, the culture, the fact that we were driving, we had to stop at a green light because you didn't know if someone was going to run the red light coming across and you're going to get T-boned. Yeah, there was. Yeah, it was. So I'm going to I'll sum up Puerto Rico and then I'll jump back in with Pete with this. So I had 2 lumps taken out of my titty, out of my nipple, and doctor said to me, he goes, that comes from one of 3 things. He goes, marijuana abuse, steroid abuse, or alcohol abuse. I go, that's called Puerto Rico. That's how we survived Puerto Rico. But one of the first days there, we discovered Graceland. Pete remembers Graceland. Graceland was the pharmacy. So back then, you could go into the pharmacy and get whatever you want. Pete, do you remember this story?
The way I remember it was we were going for supplements.
Yes.
And we walked in, and as soon as the guy who ran the place saw us, he went just like that. And he brought us to that room in the back.
Right. Yes.
Heaven.
we went into like a GNC, say, supplement store to get vitamins or whatever. The guy pulled his back and he opened drawers, filing cabinets, and whatever kind of extra paraphernalia you wanted, you got. But the other story.
I remember asking him, how did you get? Because some of it was from Japan.
Right.
And I remember him asking him, and he opened up. He turned around, and there was a door, and he opened the door, and there was an alley, and on the other side of that alley door, it was a veterinarian. I don't know if you remember that part.
Yes.
There was a vet right across the alley. Like the alley was like maybe not even 10 feet wide, and the other door, and it went in one door and in out one door and then into here. It was pretty interesting.
Wait, so he was getting gimmicks from the vet?
That's where we're getting all the enhancements from. Yes.
Yes.
Supplement store. And then we went to the pharmacy, the real pharmacy, and we walk up to the counter, and D'Lo says, somas. And they said, how many? And because we were wrestlers, you get the somas, they were like, I don't know, 50 cents a pop or something. So so D'Lo goes, I don't know, 50? So he like count off 50 somas and hand it to him. I walk up, I go, somas. They go, how many? I'm like, 100? And they're like, count off 100. So Pete comes up and he goes, somas. They go, how many? He goes, how many's in that bottle? They go, 500. He goes, 500. I freaked out. I was standing there going, you just bought 500 somas?
I don't even take I'll take one if my neck was bothering me. If I took 2, I'd be asleep for 8 hours and feel groggy. It was all about just to see how far of a limit we could push the lady to. And with every little bit. So that's why D'Lo set the standard at 50. Chaz goes more, so then I have to go above and beyond. Next thing you know, I'm walking around with a bottle of Somas.
Dude, I was literally freaking out going, you just got 500 somas. I was like, holy cow. And then I told Simon before how D'Lo and Pete would hang out sometimes in the room with us when he was allowed to.
Here we go.
Nope, that's all I'm saying. No, he would come in.
No,
I told Simon.
We can bring that up. You want to get edgy? Let's get edgy. Come on, let's do it.
What, you're going to bring up CF?
Right, so, who's CF?
I'm trying to be politically correct and not use the C word. C-face. What you called? You called her cunt face.
Oh, no. She was
Oh, boy.
I didn't probably. Well, that was probably after everything ended. No, so I was dating.
Hold on. So D'Lo had. Was he married? He wasn't married yet, but he had the girlfriend. I was seeing somebody. So D'Lo and I were sharing an apartment. But Pete brings the girlfriend with him to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Pete.
So she had a job that she worked for her father, but then she had another job where she, let's say, went on the main stage.
Whoa.
So she was a dancer. She was a stripper. And when I told her I was moving to Puerto Rico, she said, well, I'm coming. And I said, okay. I mean, I guess she figured it would have been, the relationship wouldn't have lasted. So she said, okay. And she came to Puerto Rico. So, by the way, when we broke up, she's the one that had those 500 somas, and she got those in the divorce.
But no, I was telling Simon how like we'd get so bored. D'Lo and I would put somas in the thing, and we would play the NFL football on PlayStation, and we would just let it play, and we would bet, and whoever lost had to take. You would bet somas, but you had to take, like, if the bet was 4 somas, you had to take 4 somas all at once. And then the other, and then the other rule was, however many fell out, like, you had to take. So if you're trying to only get 1 or 2, but if 4 fell out, that was the rule. You had to do 4.
Oh.
Chaz, how are you alive?
Part of that.
How are you?
How
did you survive?
Having sex with a stripper. Oh my god! Get that.
Yeah. So Puerto Rico is actually, when Pete and I really got super close, because not only were we driving together, we were hanging out together, but Pete and I actually started tagging together because they sent D'Lo off on doing his own thing, and Pete and I ran around. So we were the Los Gringos. And literally, we walked around going like this to everybody. Everybody was like, "What's that mean?" They're like, "It means asshole, ASS hole." So we used to go around to everybody going like this, and just all we did was call them cockroaches. They were all cockroaches. We called them cockroaches nonstop, and then we did.
And we were baby faces. And we were baby faces at the time.
What?
Yeah.
And then they gave us the manager, who was who was that? I see his face. I can't remember his name. The older guy.
Yeah, I can't think of his name.
But we did this. We did this angle where we were working we were working their tag champs, and I don't know, somehow like we went over by DQ or something like that. We did the angle where Pete and I ran over and grabbed the belts and we stole them. Literally ran out of the building with them. And the camera guy's following us, and Pete and I are going, "You dead bud."
Oh my god!
Hey, do you remember we did God rest his soul, Balls Mahoney?
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this. He did a hardcore match, and someone jumped in and jumped him. We had to go in and make the save, and we slid in, and there were thumbtacks all over the mat in the ring. I had thumbtacks in my forearms from sliding in, and then you and I go. We clean house. Everyone, they all leave, and I look over. I don't know if you remember this or not, but I thought it was hysterical. I look over, and Balls Mahoney's headbutting the mat with all the thumbtacks in it, and I gave you like one. I'm like, Chaz, look. And he's just sitting there just banging his head against the friggin' mat and getting all these thumbtacks in his forehead. And I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with him?
He was a special one. He was definitely
a good guy, though. He was
Yeah,
a
no,
great
he was
guy.
a great guy. Yeah, no, he was a great guy. But it was funny. We're down in Puerto Rico, and then they made it so they were trying to make it like another territory, like an OVW. So it was Savio's company. It was IWA. Savio, Miguel Perez, Jesus, Jose. Like it was all of them, and they made us go down to a school every week to train. And D'Lo and I used to sit there going, "Why are we here? Why are we training? Like this is dumb." So you remember Pablo?
Yep.
Pablo was Tiger Idly Singh's little.
Oh, Pablo Marquez.
Yes. So
Yeah, Bamboo.
Pablo's in the ring, and he's like, "Hey, we're gonna do some shoot wrestling." And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm good. He's like, "Oh, what? What are you scared? What do you think I'm gonna tap you out?" I was like, "Please don't do this. Please." I literally almost killed him because he was tapping and I wasn't letting go with a choke because I was so mad at him for making me do it. But it was just what I hated about it was like the guys were great. I just hated living there. The best part about it was our place was on the beach, so we could get up and we could go sit on the beach. And there was one time I remember I got so gimmicked up. It was like I would take if we weren't working, I would take a couple. I would go run the beach. I'd come back. I would eat. We would go to the gym. I'd take 3 or 4 somas, smoke some weed, and go sit down on the beach like this. And I would just veg right there on the beach. And I'll never forget the one time this kid comes over and he kicks my foot. And he's like, "Sir, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yep, but if you kick my foot again, I'm going to kill you." I literally hated it. And then we went to, and Loopy's was always fun. Was that the name of the place, Loopy's?
Maybe it was Loopy's.
Yeah. So that's when Pete and I got close. And there's a lot of stories we can't tell that I don't want to tell that get a little grittier than that. But yeah, that Puerto Rico was a good time.
It's a good time.
So when you were in Memphis and Puerto Rico, did you get paid extra or no? No. Okay.
What,
no.
You did?
No. That was my point. That's
saying
what I
it now
wanted.
to make.
No, that's what I wanted to tell Simon. It's like,
No, I didn't get
so not only did I have a mortgage in New Jersey, I had to buy an apartment. We had to rent the apartment in Puerto Rico. They gave us no extra money whatsoever. And then they told us we could go home. It was like every 3 weeks we could fly home. And then they started making that like 4 weeks, 5 weeks that we could
For
go
how
home.
long?
We were there, what,
We were there
5 months? 5, 6
how
months?
How long would they let you come home for?
Like a weekend.
Oh, I never got to go home. They never gave me that option.
It was like a weekend. And then then they wouldn't tell like Savio we weren't going to be there. So all of a sudden there's a TV taping and like one of us isn't there. It was just, it was not a good time in my life. That's all. I hated it. But I hated living
You were
there.
longer than I was.
What's that? What's
You were
that,
there
Pete?
longer than I was.
A little bit, yeah. I left right. That's right. They let you go. That's right. They let you go on the phone from there. I left right before 9/11. So it was the beginning of, I think it was the end of August 2001 that I left. Beginning of September.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was the beginning of July.
Right.
So that story about me getting let go, I remember it was a Wednesday. I remember specifically it was a Wednesday. And I had gone, so I got a call from Joey Abs. Because those guys Rodney and Joey Abs were still in Memphis. And they were getting rid of that territory, the Memphis territory. And Rodney was in with, what's his name? I can't think of his name. I'll think of it. Anyway, who was Brent's guy that he had? Do you remember or no?
Oh, I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his name.
Brent in the office?
Yeah. I can't remember his name. I know who you're talking about.
So anyway, I can't remember name. My names are slipping right now. So I get a call from Joey Abs. Joey Abs said that he was guys were getting called in and they were either being sent to Louisville or being sent home. And he had gotten sent home and Rodney was in there at that moment getting let go. So sure enough, I think I'm done. And that night we were driving to a show and I remember D'Lo was driving, you were sitting shotgun, and I was in the back seat, and I was kind of bummed out. I had a dip in my mouth, and I remember you turned to me and you said, "What's wrong?" And I said, I just think I'm gonna be let go. I said, the rest of the guys got let go, and then you and D'Lo were like, "No, Pete, you're not the Mean Street Posse anymore. You're Pete Gas. You're here in Puerto Rico. They're in Memphis. They got let go." So I felt a little better. We went and did the show that night. The next day, I go and I buy a bunch of groceries, which you and D'Lo ended up getting.
Yeah, I remember that.
I was done because I had gotten let go, and I got a call from Bob Clark. That's the name I was trying to.
That's it, Bob Clark.
So Bob Clark calls me, and he says to me, "Hey Pete, what you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm just walking back with some groceries." Now I know what's going to happen. He said, "Oh, okay, I'll call you back." I said, "Just give me the fucking news." And he's like, "Well, the office is going to go in a different direction. They're going to, we're going to let you go. Dr. Death's going to be in touch with you. We're going to send you to Japan. Would you be willing to go?" I said, "I'm not ready to leave this business." I said, "I feel like I've improved a lot, and I feel like I can still do something here." I felt bad. I felt like shit because it was like one of those things where we were involved and on TV every week. We didn't know our ass from our elbow. And now I finally know how to do a match, to the best of my ability. And I felt like I was working my ass off. I had dropped 45 pounds, and felt like I was in pretty damn good shape. And then at that time, like remember Percy came to visit us?
Yeah.
To scout. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And I sat with him in the stands before the doors opened, and he was like, "Yeah, man, they're really high on you." So I was getting built up, and Dennis Brent is the guy's name from The Office. It wasn't Brent. That's his last. Dennis Brent. I had spoken to him 2 days prior to that phone call, and he said, "Yeah," he goes, "Shane just purchased WCW in the storyline, and it only makes sense that he brings his posse with him to WCW." So I thought that was the route that I was going, and then all of a sudden I get that call, and he's like, "Yeah," he's like, "We're gonna see what happens. We'll let you go, and you go to Japan and work on your craft." So I was like, "Okay," and then I never got the call from Dr. Death, and then that's when I actually asked JR. I had written the book, Looking at the Lights, and I had gone and did an interview with JR and on his podcast back then. Thank you, bud. I appreciate that. And anyway, I go and I do I do his interview, and afterwards, after we were off the air, I said, "Hey, JR, just out of curiosity, why did you guys send me to Memphis? I mean, why did you take me from Memphis to bring me to Puerto Rico?" And they said, "We saw something in you." He said, "We didn't see it in Rodney. And Joey Abs, unfortunately, had some demons that they knew about, and they just saw something in me that they wanted to try to work, to see where it would go and stuff. And then, with the purchase of WCW, they just had so much talent and not so little time to put it on that I became expendable." That's the way he explained it to me.
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember it being tough. And then my story was basically they brought me back up to Philly to do TV, to do a dark match. And I'll never forget, Shane was there, and Shane was like, "Go out there and kill it, like show everybody what you can do," and blah blah blah. My body was transformed from before to when, obviously being in Puerto Rico, transformed a lot. But he was like, "Go out there, show us who Chaz is," blah blah blah. I went there, did a great match, and then the next day they did TV in Baltimore. And I remember walking into JR going, "Hey, like, what's going on?" Because my contract was coming up in January, and that's right around when they were buying WCW. And JR looks at me and he goes, "Well, no one knows who you are." I go, "What do you mean you don't know who I am?" And he goes, "Well, creative doesn't know. Like, who's Chaz?" And I'm like, "You know what?" I go, "I don't fucking know either. Like, you keep changing my gimmick. You went from this," and I go, "But everyone knows who Mosh is. Let me just run as Mosh." And he was like, "No, they don't want to do that. So, figure out something between now and January, or, you're just not going to be re-signed." And that's when that's when Vince Russo was starting his TNA thing, and they were running in Australia. And Russo reached out to me, and he goes, "Hey," he goes, "do you want to come?" I reached out to JR, and I was like, "Hey, they're doing this thing. Can I go?" And he goes, "No, you're under contract with us." I go, "But you're not using me. Can I just go?" He goes, "If you can go," he goes, "but then you're in breach of contract, and we're going to release you," because I was still getting paid. And I mean, hindsight being 2020, I probably should have just left and went there, but I had still had hopes of going back. And then that's when I started. I was sending. Bruce Pritchard told me to send ideas in, and I was sending them in, and I was seeing my ideas unfold live on TV without me being. So yeah, so just being kind of told, like, because, and this will jump into Pete. What I wanted to talk to you about next was one of the things I want to do with these is kind of like focus on life after wrestling, because there's everyone hears the negative stories of guys who made it. And then, then they had issues, they had drug issues, they had that, they had their demons, whatever. But you don't ever hear like the good parts, the good stuff. So for me, I'm fortunate enough to where, I pushed and made myself successful. So, I know you did the book, which is great. I loved it. And I think I told you this before. I really only read it to start because I wanted to see how many times my name was in it. But it was I really enjoyed it. It was an easy read. Being that I'm working on a book, is there advice you could give me with that?
Yeah, I think you just be honest. I think if you really want a great selling book, I think you tell some stories that you may not want to tell.
Right.
But that's the only regrets I have. So when I wrote my book, they told me to go back. Publishing company actually who picked it up, Skyhorse Publishing, wanted me to go back and tell a lot about how I felt in those certain situations, and I think that was big. It helped the book a lot. First off, it gives you more words to fill the book, but secondly, it gives the reader an idea of what it was like and what was going through my head at that point of time, and during certain situations when, the way my book is, it's about, being a wrestling. I was always a wrestling fan. And then all of a sudden I'm a heel now in wrestling and being on sometimes a Monday Night Raw, being on 5 different segments, which was like, it was a dream. Right.
Right.
And what I was thinking through those periods of time, what was I through, so like my advice, that would be biggest, again, the stories, there's other stories that I'm sure people would love to hear that, I'm sure there's like a statute of limitations, I think, that are protecting you. But if you really wanted to go into that area, because I'm sure that would sell a shit ton of books. But, man, it was fun. Yeah, I just keep thinking about how much fun it was. I know what you said about Puerto Rico. Just to sidetrack it, just to finish on that. Puerto Rico, okay, there was times we bitched and moaned, but when we look back at it, it was fun. We made the most of it, right? I mean, we had a fun time, and we
had a
lot.
blast. Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
So,
yes.
Even and I even like my Memphis times, we bitched and moaned. Like, if we had to take a shit, we'd be like, yeah, I gotta go take a Memphis. Just feel like, because we just felt like it. But, looking back at it now, it's like, man, I'd love to be in Memphis now, working, wrestling, not having to work a 9 to 5,
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, it's pretty cool though. But yeah, I mean, that's the best advice I can give. I don't know if that helped or not, but
yeah, no, it does. I've been there's a couple of spots where I've had to throw a curve here and there, but for the most part, it's 100% honesty, total transparency. I'm trying to figure out some stories that I can put in and I can't, and maybe hold off some of those stories for maybe another book.
There you go.
A road book, road stories, maybe of things that happened to other people that I heard about.
Yeah, those other people.
Right, other people being Glenn. I can point it all. But yeah, no, and that's actually part of what I've been doing is the things that were going on in my career at that time and what I was thinking, what was going through my mind and how I felt. And I think I picked that up off of your book when I read yours, because after reading yours is when I went, fuck, I can it's not that hard. It's just telling stories and what's going on and stuff like that.
Yep. So the guy I wrote it with, he actually helped me with. We did about at least 30 hours of interviews.
Okay.
And and it was a lot of just talking about all different things and taking notes and then I didn't know John Robinson is the guy who I wrote it with. He had done a bunch of books for WWE and he did a book about being on the road and some stories and I told him the stories and John was laughing his ass off. He's like, you should write a book. I was like, it's funny you say that because I always thought about wanting to write a book. He's like, I'm finishing this book on Ultimate Warrior. As soon as I'm done with that, I'll write it with you. And then we just did the interviews and then he put an outline together on how he felt like the book would flow better. And then he would bring up a topic and say, go, write. And I would just write and I'd send it to him, that it made sense. And we bounce it back and forth, and that's how we kind of wrote the book, and it kind of worked. It just kind of worked out well. And, he would tell me, like, yeah, you're a little vague on this one. Well, I got to be vague on that one. I'm married. All right, well, then just, but I kept it clean because of the marriage, and I'm not married anymore, so I wish I could wrote it differently now.
Listen, you can go back and re-edit stories and do a whole nother book. You can do a segment 2, a part 2 with the See, my whole thing is I want my audience to be right. I want my story to I'm telling my stories if I'm talking to Tyler because I'm working with a writing coach and an editor right now, and that's what she said. Like, who's your target audience? You have to act like you're sitting down having a conversation with them, and that's Tyler. And I know he probably would laugh and he wouldn't care, but at the same time, maybe those are stories him and I that I can tell him over a campfire with some tequila over a campfire out at camp. Quit your bitching. So maybe that's where those stories are meant to be told. Not So
or maybe we get Pete. Maybe we get Pete back for a special Patreon edition of the Mosh Sez Show, and people have to subscribe and pay the 3 of us to listen to these stories that are otherwise off limits.
That's not a bad idea.
Now I know we mentioned
podcast pay-per-view.
Yeah, we mentioned at the top of the show that we were going to ask Pete about his favorites to work with, his least favorites. Pete, maybe we can arrange it so that we can have you send in a little mini video of your top 5 favorite wrestlers of all time, because I'm curious to know. But since we're creeping up on an hour, I have my last question I really want to ask. I hope it's something that you don't get asked about because I'm super excited about it, but I wanted to talk about the gas mask. One thing you and Chaz have in common is that you guys have finishers that are not often seen, not often replicated, and are so original and unique. And I remember being in junior high, maybe before that, the first time I saw you do the gas mask and thinking, holy smokes, what a move. The setup, for those of you that are uninitiated, are unaware, the gas mask was essentially an inverted reverse full Nelson, where Pete would be facing the guy, hook under the arms, grab him by the face, pick him up in a spine buster position. And Pete, I want to know, how did that come about? Who helped you put that move together? Who put it in your brain? Because I've only seen one other person do it. It was years after. Luke Gallows has used a version of it, but you were the very first person.
So I saw Luke Gallows. I'll work my way back. Luke Gallows used it, and I did a show for the Nasty Boys. We were at City Field, and I was long out of the business, and I saw that Luke used it, and I'm sitting next to him in the locker room, and I looked over at Luke. I said, "How do you like the gas mask?" And his face just went, like he was surprised I saw it, and he's like, "Yeah, man, I like it." I was like, "Yeah, you do it better than I do it." I didn't get a lot of opportunities because I didn't go over a lot. So, but yeah, that was pretty cool. But the way I came about it was Rodney and I were training with Dr. Tom Pritchard at the studio at Titan Tower. They had a ring set up in the warehouse, and we were at one point. Dr. Tom had said, "You guys got to come up with a a finishing move, something that everybody can take. And so Rodney came up with one where he did like a, what do they call that? I can't think of the name of the move. Anyway, he did like a move where you jump over the guy and you grab his chin. And anyway, he did it off
A block,
the
like a
top rope where
blockbuster?
most guys just do. Not a blockbuster. I can't think of the name of it. I'm sorry. I'm just I sometimes things pop out of my head, then they'll pop back in. Anyway, so Rodney did it off the top rope, and all it was is the guy just stood there, and Rodney grabbed him by his chin, and he took a back bump.
Right.
And Rodney flipped over him. So anyway, so Rodney was coming out trying to come up with a name. I'm like, Rod, you're up high. I go, why don't you call it the High Society? He's like, that's a good idea. I was like, all right. So Rodney was taken care of with his move, and I'm like, all right, well. Dr. Tom was like, so what are you thinking? I said, well, gas. I said, there's gas chamber. Then I was going to use, what is it called? So anyway, I just said to him, I was like, well, I envision a mask, a gas mask across the guy's face. So Dr. Tom's like, well, why don't you hook him instead of a full Nelson, do it where the mask is. And then, so we kind of did it. We practiced it and everything. And, at first the guy's legs would straddle me as we went down, and I'd land on my ass and he'd land flat. And then it was hard for me to go to a pin from that point. So we kind of did it where I kicked my legs out to the side. So did the guy taking it. And then we went that way, and it was easy for me from that point to just roll over and hook, grab the far leg and hook it for the pin. It was a lot easier that way. But the very first one was like a spine buster. You're right.
Yeah, and P, I'm so glad you mentioned the High Society because the High Society ended up being a name they applied to another move you guys used that was so breathtaking. The first time I saw it, I thought I was going to choke on my tongue. You and Rodney Irish whipped your opponent into a back body drop that Joey Abs caught the guy in a power bomb, and that the announcers ended up calling that the High Society.
No, that was called the Stock Exchange.
Yeah, so that was the name that they ended up using for it. But the first time you guys used it on TV, they mentioned it as a High Society. That was another move. Again, something like the stage dive. You don't see. That's not a color by numbers tag team move. It's so impressive. And that's just one thing that you and Chaz have always had in common in my mind. The maneuvers you guys have used are so unique and all their own. And it's something that can really be attributed respectively to you guys' time in the ring.
No, it's pretty cool.
So that move was initially for me and Joey Abs to do because I was higher up. So when the guy comes up, he's already high up to land on Joey Abs. And Rodney kind of snuck in there and said, "Oh, I'll do it." So Rodney had to pound his chest a little bit.
Rodney's ego took over and said he had to be a part of it. All right, Pete. I have one last closing question for you. I've had this before, and I don't like to say like any regrets because I don't think either one of us have any regrets on what we've done. But with that being said, what is one thing you would have done differently? Knowing what you know now, Pete Gas now, what would you have done different? One thing you would have done differently back then? Because I know what mine is. So I want to know what yours is.
So my first thought was being more of a student, but that's not necessarily true because I watched a lot of film on the past because they used to tell us what's old is new.
Yeah.
To look at stuff from the 80s and stuff like that and stuff that hasn't been seen in a while. So it's not really about being a student. It's more about I should have taken more chances. I was a little bit close to the vest. I was a little bit more conservative. I was more afraid of instead of being, how do I say this? Instead of me, I got to the point where I was finally confident. I had the same thing in football where, when you first start playing, you're not really sure of yourself. But once you get your feet underneath you, you start knowing the technique and you know how you're more confident. now all of a sudden you could be more aggressive. I think what I did was I kind of stayed with that jobber mentality, wanting to put people over because that's what got me there. I was trying to stay there. I think part of me, they talk about John Cena grabbing that brass ring and all that other shit. I think I got to the point where I wanted to be, I felt like I was capable of doing more things. I think I should have been a little bit more aggressive in doing that. And I don't know, you like to talk about matches and, you got to get yours in the match. You got to get your shit in. I think I should have done more of that.
Right.
To show
Fair
what,
enough.
and I feel like that's something I should have done more.
So Pete, in a nutshell, Pete, you feel like you worked too hard to stay there as opposed to excelling and advancing?
I think I was not in a rut. I jobbed, right? I enhanced other talent, right? And I kind of still was in that mindset of, okay, I need to put this guy over. I need to do this instead of, fuck, maybe it's your time to, shine. Get your shit in, get your stuff in. And I don't mean not in a dick type of way. I'm talking about just get your stuff
little
in.
more.
Show
You
the
needed to
office,
be
show the fans what you can do.
right. You felt like you should have been a little more assertive than you were. You weren't as assertive as you think you probably should have, or could have become a little bit more assertive in your matches and doing more and pushing the envelope a little bit.
Yeah,
I get all that.
There's wrestling fans that get it. There's wrestling. I think that nobody realizes what Rodney and I had to endure. Some people do, but but a lot of people oh, those guys sucked. Those guys sucked because they were taken off the fucking street with no training and put in the ring with guys like Chad, the best of the business. That's why they're there. You guys
were supposed to, and I don't mean this the way it's going to sound, but you guys were supposed to suck. Like you weren't supposed to come in and know how to do everything. You were supposed to come in and just fight and brawl and then get out and just be part of a storyline. You weren't supposed to be a main part. You weren't supposed to be a main storyline. You were supposed to be part of a storyline, but then you evolved into something else. So when you first came in, you were supposed to suck. That's what it is. Yeah.
Right. And we got heat for that, and heat with the crowd, which is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to either have them love you or hate you, and we got that heat that we needed. And a lot of guys, there were guys that some of them resented us being there because they weren't getting any time on TV, and whether they called it favoritism or not, we still had heat with the crowd. So
right. Listen, you were drawing money.
It's that whole concept, right? And that's the whole thing. That's the whole point of being in the business is drawing money.
And we all know Vince's business 100%. And if Vince thinks he can make money off you, he's going to use you, and he doesn't care who else is being stepped on while he uses you. And that's the one thing I learned with him was if he thinks he can make money with you, he's going to use you, he's going to push you. But the second he doesn't think he's going to make money with you anymore, you're gone, and you're literally dead to him. But that's business, and that's one of the things I never realized when I was there. Was how the political business side of it, but I get it. Yep. Awesome. Well, Pete, it's been an hour. Appreciate you being on here. This was fun, and can't wait to see you when we go laugh at micro wrestlers again. those little bastards.
We got to talk about that one day.
Yes, we do. So that's another time.
Well, gang, I just want to say. I just want to say what a freaking thrill it was for me. Obviously, I can't contain my fandom, Pete. This is something I've always wanted to do for, God, since I first saw you guys over 20 years ago. Being from Connecticut, I also, as Chaz can tell you, am not the most athletic guy in the world, so I lived vicariously through you, and look at the shut up, Chaz, the heights that you reached. I really hope this is the first of a multi-part appearance of Pete Gas on the Mosh Sez Show. Pete, is there anywhere you are, anything you'd like to share, anything you'd like to plug? Let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm in West Palm Beach. I sell construction equipment. Part of a Kubota dealer. Other than that, that's all I got going, man. I got that, a new girlfriend, and enjoying my back nine of life, I guess.
All right, then here's what I got.
Stop it with that back nine.
Here's what I got. Me, Chaz, and Pete Gas, Universal Studios strip on me, and we'll document the whole day.
Done.
Can you imagine that?
Done.
I'm serious. I'm serious. Chaz knows I'm not joking. I'll get us into the parks.
Done.
Awesome. Well, Pete, I appreciate it. And let me hit this end recording, and we shall talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right,
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you.